Namaskar. Welcome everyone to this rather important session today, which is on the intersection of fundamental pillars of contemporary life, those of education and technology. Before we jump into this rather important topic, as we will be going into, and various nuances thereof of that, and we have a very eminent panel of panelists today, and we look forward to discussing the various aspects. Just to kind of contextualize, if you could have the slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. So when we talk about education and we talk about what it means to have a certain liberation of sorts, right? I mean, when we talk about the Indic, mode of education or the understanding of education thereof. So I would like to bring to attention one of the shlokas from the Brahmabindu Upanishad, which talks about, which says, Eva Manushyana Karanam Bandhamakshayo Bandhaya Vishasaktam Mukte Nivishyam Smritam, which basically means that enslavement or liberation is dependent on the mind and the conditioning thereof. Mata Amritanandamayi, with her divine grace, has been talking about, has told us a lot about her views on education, and she has mentioned about the fact that education for livelihood alone will never make our life full and complete. So when we talk about education and technology, the idea is to integrate technology in a manner which brings forth an equitable distribution of resources and opportunities, a certain empowering aspect of that integration, so to say. And there are some key elements which we have to address and look into when we talk about this theme and topic. And those are those of access. Firstly, we'll be talking about access in our discussion about how opportunities and resources should reach out to the last mile as much as possible, cutting across different identities and cross-sections of society. Equity, of course, is intricately linked to that. Creativity, about empowering a person to become independent individuals with critical and creative potential being harnessed, and of course, liberative potential as well. Just to give a little bit of a historical tidbit, there is on the right-hand side, one of the first machines, so to say, it's called a teaching machine, which was brought forth in the 1920s. And we have come a long way from that. We are looking at artificial intelligence, we're looking at blockchain technology, various aspects, and we'll be discussing about those as well. And of course, this is intricately connected to the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly that of SDG 4, which talks about quality education and access to education thereof. We have had the National Education Policy, which has come forth in 2020, where we have had the discussion on a National Education Technology Framework, which will try to see what is best in terms of what kind of technologies can be brought forth and what are the different needs that need to be addressed with that. We have had seminal and very, very exemplary work being done at Amrita Vishwavidyapeetham on this front as well, with work on CREATE, which is an initiative, as well as various other immersive experience opportunities as well. And that stands out as an example for days ahead in the country in general. So just to have a quick overview of the approach, this is just one example approach or some of the points which are of importance, and we'll be discussing some of them or all of them as time permits. Of course, it is not about technology dependence or rather technology being the primary driver of this process, but rather the needs of that particular pedagogical system or that the academic expectations of the system. Setting expectations with clear-cut goals and objectives is very, very important as well. Because it is important to have a criteria in a regular manner to see what is being achieved with a certain specific technology. Instructional strategies, and we'll be discussing that hopefully in some detail, about how the teachers need to be equipped with the understanding of harnessing technology in the best possible manner, creating the environment for the optimum harnessing of that technology, and finally, analyzing and undertaking revisions as is important as we go along in that process. Now, when it comes to India and beyond, the global south, as well as various other areas in the world, there are some key areas which need to be addressed particularly. One is that of uneven access, of course. there are connectivity issues. We can have a lot of good technologies, but that does not help until we have the ways to get it across to in terms of connectivity, in terms of what is needed to operate that technology. There is some bit of work needed on the digital literacy front as well. Infrastructure limitations still exist, and affordability, of course, is an important aspect to be looked into. There are three case examples that I would like to put forward, or rather statements which have been put forth, two by United Nations, UNESCO and UNICEF, and one by the Brookings Institution. UNESCO, of course, has been looking at local technology-based open school systems. UNICEF, on the other hand, has been looking at various different components, for instance, interactive whiteboards, projectors, trying to see how the ecosystem can be built for a comprehensive learning and teaching and learning management system. And Brookings Institution has been particularly focusing on internet connectivity with various different interesting areas, such as the purchasing of cellular data, having certain ways in which families can be made to liaise with, or rather connected with, companies that offer free or low cost internet, and so on and so forth. And lastly, before we go into the discussion, some of the key areas where technology has been used at the moment in terms of education. Of course, I go back to the point, it's not about technology first, but it's the needs. So artificial intelligence and machine learning, of course, but the primary reason for that is to look at adaptive learning as a paradigm, and trying to see whether we can customize education or tailor to the various tendencies, the potential, the talent of the students in a certain cohort, let's say. So the policy suggestion thereof would be development of a tiered framework for the same, and possibly integrated adaptive testing models as well. Then there is blockchain technology, which looks at development of decentralized learning platforms and looking at integrated secure academic record keeping repositories where that can be used across the board by different levels of the educational system. And lastly, the immersive experience, which is very important. And at Amrita, we have also been trying to look into this, and in the country in general. So how to look at developing a comprehensive benchmarking system for a cloud-based, integrated, immersive, technology-based educational solution. So we will be coming into all of them. So I'd like to begin. So if I could request you all to please introduce yourselves to begin with.
Thank you. Hi, thank you for the overview. So my name is Noel Corvo. I'm a lawyer from Canada. I've been formerly the special advisor to the CIO of Canada on AI policies. And my specific focus today is I'll be really bringing in the importance of digital literacy and what that means, and what are some of those important considerations from that side.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Oded Margalit. I'm from the Ben Gurion University in Israel, and for the past 20 years organizing competitions in computer science as a way to attract young students, high school and below, to learn this important topic.
My name is Amy Edelstein. I'm the founder of the nonprofit Inner Strength Education that works bringing mental health and liberative technologies to under-resourced youth in America.
So let us begin with the question of access, as I think you were mentioning about, and what are the different challenges that we see thereof, number one, and what are the different innovative, creative solutions one could go with, especially looking at the broad spectrum of the the countries, the circumstances that exist thereof, and how do we tailor that so that it is a universal and comprehensive framework, if you would like to begin with that.
So if I can just reframe maybe a little bit the question, part of the challenge that I see here is the access piece for me is understanding what's at play, right? There's a big knowledge gap right now as to exactly how to interact with AI systems. So right now, if we look, for instance, at the EU AI Act, that's defining AI as a system that can interact, influence environments and make decisions. This is, it requires a certain kind of understanding of what kind of relationship should students have when they're dealing with a system like this, which isn't part of the curriculum right now. It's not part of the the training program. So when we're looking at how do we interact and collaborate with a system requires a specific skill set, it requires a specific access to the technology. And unless these foundational components are present, I think we're going to be in the situation where we won't be able to create a relationship that's going to be ethical and responsible as students increasingly interact with AI systems.
What I would like to claim is that there are two trends that are actually in the same direction. One is it's much cheaper and easier to get access to computing. When I was a child, I used punched cards to program a CDC old computer, and now everybody has a smartphone and access to computers. And the other, we may do things that are teaching computer science thinking without any special hardware. If you want, I'll tell you later how to program a machine learning program that learns to play and win in tic-tac-toe game using M&Ms and cups. That's all you need.
So there's a question of access and providing the hardware or the connectivity. There's a question of what are those individuals going to access. And before we make universal access the priority, I think we need to look at AI that can learn and respond in local dialect, to local custom, to be adaptive in its learning technology so that we don't universalize everyone's experience, because we're going to very, very quickly lose the richness of culture.
I should have clarified on that. By universal, I meant cutting across and reaching out to the last mile. But of course, there's a lot of decentralization and nuances that are very important to maintain as we go along with it. So you mentioned about your work with mental health, and I would like to come into that area of the subject as well, and more importantly into disability and how technology can really facilitate a lot of beneficial progress on that front. I would like to have your views on that, please. Yeah.
So I think there's a real opportunity with technology to make accessible both doors to modalities for mental health, for personal wellness, for defining goal and purpose, which seems to be in the background in our culture as a whole. I think the adaptive learning is really important, and the privacy issue, because individuals who've experienced trauma, may not find an individual, a human who's accessible. They may not have the privacy. They may not have even the surroundings. If you think about people who are living in overcrowded situations, who often experience a lot of trauma due to domestic violence, drug and mental health issues at the home. So it's very hard to separate oneself from one's environment in order to seek out those supports. So I think digital technology can really enable that. I also think digital technology can teach us to be more empathetic towards each other. So using adaptive robotic technology to respond, to communicate, how to communicate compassionately towards oneself, towards other people, how to think about one's thoughts in a way that will promote kindness towards self and others. So I think that we can use technology in that way to really advance and up-level our attitudes towards ourselves and others.
To continue your point, there is the very famous ELIZA program from the 1960s that gave psychological treatment to people using a very, very rudimentary models. And there is also work, Goran Gordon is researching on how to learn, how to teach, using robots to teach 5 years old, investigating the reward system. It's a really fascinating topic.
The other reflection I have on access, which I think is interesting to follow, is traditionally the idea of the classroom was always very much a physical environment, managed with the confines of the classroom. But now I think we're moving to a space where perhaps the classroom of the future is going to be very much digitally enabled. And I wonder what you see as maybe some of those interplays with access, and if this is actually going to be improving perhaps the ability for greater outreach.
I mean, unfortunately, right now, what I see is the negative effect of technology on classrooms. So in my work, I see high school students glued to their phones who are watching movies, who are talking to other people during class, who are playing games, who are watching videos. And the interest in an interpersonal relationship with their colleagues, their fellow students and their teachers has really taken a back seat. So right now I'm seeing that we need to figure out how to use technology so that students use it to not avoid a human interaction.
I completely agree. A friend of mine, Sheizaf Rafaeli, is teaching, and instead of requiring his students to shut down their phones, etc., he opens a Twitter account which follows a specific hashtag related to his talk and says, everyone in the classroom wants to ask a question, ask it on Twitter. Everybody will see it. I'll see it. I'll answer it in the right time and place without disturbing my talk. Technology, if used correctly, can help improve instead. But yes, if done incorrectly, like everything else, it can be abused and.
Yeah. So I think that's a very important point that you raised here, which is that, again, as Swami Amrita Swarupanand Maharaj said yesterday, that, the way in which you harness it and how you utilize it. So my next question would be around what you just mentioned as to how technology can actually be utilized in a manner to improve the interpersonal skills, to work together, to have that more nuanced approach towards education as a pursuit. What do you think that there are some innovative ways one could go about with it, such that integration is actually facilitating this rather than being a destructive force in that sense? Yeah.
Well, I think two ways that are already being used is independent education programs, so independent learning modules where the technology function identifies where a student has trouble, each place where they stumble, and then breaks that component down into smaller blocks so that they learn and move through successfully. I think that's one way that could really advance education. And, oftentimes that's where students fall behind. They can't get over something, the teacher has moved on, and they give up on their own learning and their own potential. I think another way that can be supportive is really providing inner and interpersonal support, because I really do feel that young people need a sense of goal, need a sense of purpose, need a sense of what the higher capacities of human development are and why it's worth striving for them. And I think that can be seeded in a secular way, embedded with any subject, in a way that individual teachers may not have the background, the depth, the knowledge, or the time to do. So I do think that AI technology can bring in a level of philosophical inquiry that will augment our human capacities and in the end bring about a more humane interaction between us.
The Khan University, one of the largest MOOC, massive online open courses supplier, is a way to teach. It asks you, for example, to add numbers until 10, and if you answer 9 questions consecutively correct, it moves to the next level. They realized that in some cases it's not enough, in some cases it's too much, and they added a very sophisticated statistical way of moving you forward without losing you, giving the teacher, the students are having trouble with number 7 or whatever. So technology can help in that, and we can do much more. We can measure heartbeat and other physical, the size of the pupils from a distance, and then see if people are disengaged and change the way we are teaching, use the AI to find more persuasive ways. The questions of connecting humans, I see it a lot in the very irritating questions to mathematicians. Why do I need to know X and Y? And you can, it's a long story, but you should answer it. You must connect the people to explain them why they are doing what they're doing.
So one experiment that I've done when I was teaching at the Faculty of Law in Ottawa, and I was teaching right at the time when ChatGPT was released, and so I thought this is incontournable, right? I must do something with this, and so I started asking students like, okay, let's do this, right? In your assignment, you need to use ChatGPT, like that's going to be a condition, and then I'm starting to think like, how do you actually manage this, right? From that interpersonal consideration. And what we ended up doing is that they could do everything on ChatGPT, but the final exam would be a discussion, right? So they would do all their research, they would do all their memos, and they would do it glued, right, to your analogy, glued to their phones or whatever, and this was fine. But so I think there is a way that even if you go far down the path of, you know, an interaction with an AI system, that you could find those mechanisms for that interpersonal connection, and because I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. I just think we need to be creative in our way, that again, to my point of collaborating with another intelligence, right, with another system that can really work with you. So I think there are hooks, even if it's, you know, quite deep in the use of technology.
Yeah, so a very important point which you mentioned about is to do with how teachers and the system, the technology can work together for instructional purposes and various other aspects of education. But during my consultation with the Ministry of Human Resource Development, Government of India, this was just before the National Education Policy, and we had a national consortium for school teachers, you know, with the NCRT and SCRT, which are the central boards. And one of the key challenges that came thereof, and I think it's a challenge across the world, is that of teachers actually, you know, taking on those technologies, being equipped for that. Because in the surveys that we had, I mean, the students were much more, you know, positive about it. They really wanted to kind of go ahead and check this out. What's up, right? And you had things like experiential learning, of course. You had things like differentiated curriculum, which I think you briefly mentioned about, and how there can be unique trajectories that can be taken, customized as per the performance or the interests of the people. But my question is, how can we make it better such that not only do we have instructional strategies, but also an environment where the teachers feel equipped and empowered to harness that technology in the best possible manner and take the students along? Yeah.
So in Canada, education is jurisdiction by provinces, right? And one of the challenges is because it's a very divisive issue, right? So some teachers are very much like, you know, you can't use technology, and others are very pro. And because it's regulated by the provinces, it becomes very political. So I think that one of the big opportunities for civil society here is exactly how to influence you know, the politicians that ultimately are accountable to develop those programs, to really see those benefits, because we're seeing a lot of debates of the merits, and I don't think it can be solved in the current structure, the jurisdictional context, at least in Canada. So.
I agree that the most important point to change the situation is the teachers. Teach the teachers. There are a lot of interesting and useful way to teach, but some of them, I'm part of the advisory committee for the computer science in the Israeli Ministry of Education, and teachers find it very frightening sometimes. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine went into a class and said, let's play a game. You'll ask me a question. If I know how to answer it, you'll get a point. If I don't, but I'll use Google to find it in 5 minutes, you get 3 points. If I don't, you get 5 points. And the whole class is scored, so it's not a competition. We are playing together. And it's very frightening because some teachers think they are the source of authority. They must know every answer, and they are afraid from people asking them questions that they wouldn't know how to answer. And he did the opposite way. He says, we are looking for a good questions that are not solvable easily. And so that's, I think, the right way to do. Teach the teachers.
I agree that shifting what teachers do and how they do it is going to be more important than just figuring out how to help teachers use technology. Teachers teach because they have a passion to inspire that creative spark in students. And just simply telling a teacher, here, use this technology, feels like a removal of the essence of the teacher's function, which is to connect one-to-one with every student and to see their potential unfold. And if a teacher feels that they have no use doing that, they're not going to want to teach. They're not going to want to be there. That is going to translate verbally or non-verbally to the student, and students are going to withdraw from learning. So engaging, redefining the role for a teacher in this new world of technology so that the teacher is holding space for creativity. The teacher is there providing stability and support to allow questioning to occur, allow not knowing to occur, I think is going to be essential. So the way we teach teachers to empower their role in this new landscape is going to be more important than just teaching them how to use digital world.
Absolutely. Before I open it up to the audience, we'll have some views from the audience as well. The one last point, which is very important to address, is that of integrity. And this comes at various levels, of course. There is technical integrity and upscaling, as we were discussing before. There is, of course, academic integrity as well. Because I remember that during my time recently at Harvard, and Harvard MIT had a notice which came out about ChatGPT, right? And about research papers and how reports are being, written using that, right? And there are other ways to countermeasure, to, keep checks and balances on that. So there's a whole different, aspect on that as well, which is to do with both these aspects, which is that privacy and technical integrity of the system itself and how we upscale that, as well as the academic integrity of the process, right, of the educational process and the various, assessments and projects and so on and so forth. So I would like to have your views on that.
That's a tough one, right? Like my experience with using ChatGPT in the classroom was incredible. It was, I think, a big success. And what it kind of highlighted was this idea that perhaps the future is never starting on a blank page, right? Like that you're always building on something that's started for you. But how do you deal with that integrity question, and I don't know the answer to that, right? Like this is, I think, the puzzle that needs to be cracked. Yeah, I think that this is the discussion, but I think it's a burning platform because I mean it is being used, it will continue to be used, and finding that mechanism I think is what's needed, but I don't know the answer.
So you can try to fight this game by anti-plagiarism technology, looking for copycats, writing a machine learning algorithm to detect ChatGPT output, etc., etc. But I think the right answer to this question is not this one. Talking about security attacks, cybersecurity attacks, and a lot of problems in the world, if you go back, the original source of it are bad people who are malicious and doing bad things, and education can solve the root of this problem. Because if we'll try to prevent someone from physically hurting someone else by shielding, etc., it's an endless game. But if we try to make him understand, connect to him, so he won't want to hurt other people, that's the right way to solve it. Same here. If you are a good student who wants to learn, you can use ChatGPT as a tool. But if you're not learning from it, don't do it. Don't do it just because you want to pass the exam without understanding, because you want to learn. That's why you are here.
I think this is a very difficult question. I don't have the answer for it either. And it's very difficult, I think, for students looking at their peers who may get a better grade because they turn in more work because they use ChatGPT, whereas the student who struggles to write their own essay, to understand the material because they're passionate about learning, may end up being penalized for that. And I think that's a very difficult question. I'm not sure how to resolve it, but I do think that it does come back to being, what are we educating for? Are we educating for creativity, depth of humanity, knowledge, love of learning, discovery, or are we just kind of stacking up credentials for a job that's going to pay more. I think that's part of our problem here.
Just back to my GPT experience. So I looked at the quality of the papers, right? And I kind of did like a blind kind of grading. And what I noticed is that my top students were still top students, right? Like, and they did great papers, but the overall average went up. So I think who really benefited were traditionally the students that may have performed less well. So it didn't really impact the high performing students, but it did increase the overall average of the class. So I do think in terms of, some of the value there is, it seems it worked out well for those that were maybe struggling before.
That's a very interesting insight. Thanks for that. I'd like to open it up to the audience. Yes, sir.
My name is Kalyanji and I'm from Seva Bharati, one of the CSO. Okay, I'm basically an online business coach. Okay, so my question here is, there is one area which is really not addressed, that is parents. Okay, before COVID, we used to tell our kids, don't touch laptop, don't touch mobile phones and all those things. Suddenly the COVID comes and they are all asked to learn through mobiles and all those things. So as a parent, we don't know what he or she is browsing, whether he's browsing dark web, or Thor, or is he using Google? Actually, there is one area that is the parents needs to be taught and given at least some basic learnings on what is it that the kid is doing, or what are the things that, how you can at least restrict those people from using it and all those things. So that area needs to be addressed. Is there anything that you can talk about that?
It's a very, very important point because it goes back to the point on environment and also about how you go about with the integrity and the various aspects of that. So would you like to take that, sir?
I can repeat the answer to my previous answer. There are two ways. One is to have parent control, smart filters, etc. And the other is to make sure that you educated your child not to do it, and if he's doing it, to be open and talk to you about it. If he's bored from his classroom and he wants to play games, he should say it, and
But the question is, the parents just know how to do that. Most of the parents even don't know how to use a mobile, don't know how to use browsers, all those things. So there's a big problem there. Hope you understand the seriousness of what I'm talking about.
I guess there are two problems. One is that some parents don't understand technology. The other problem is that there are parents who are glued to their technology and they're setting a bad example. So I think if parents parent through love and creativity and time together, then use of technology can be naturally regulated. And if parents are absorbed in their own stress and technology and aren't able to connect with their children, that's the issue that we need to resolve.
And I can link to in the inauguration ceremony yesterday, the story about the grandfather, a third grader, didn't know anything, and the grandson came very enthusiastic about the technology, and he was keep asking him questions like, what can it do, how it can affect the world, and you don't need to know the technology, you need to know human to connect to them and get the answer.
Thank you. You had a point to raise? Sorry, there, please. Can we have a mic? Yeah.
Hi, this is Abhijit. I'd like to appreciate the panel and the moderator for putting across a very wonderful session and giving that kind of feedback. I think I echo your thoughts when it comes to there's this quote that's going around in the internet today that the AI will not replace you today, but a person who is using an AI will potentially replace you. And I think efforts towards teachers, and as the gentleman shared, parents, I would like to ask the panel that are there some efforts like these that are happening towards educating the student or educating the teachers and parents to use use solutions like these effectively? If not, can there be a recommendation that can come wherein CSOs here today who are technologically savvy, or can CSOs be trained to then further train their beneficiary pool on impact of these technologies or how to leverage these technologies for the better good.
Thank you.
So in the education society, it takes time. If you want to change the curriculum of new teachers, there are a lot of committees, etc. So we are not working in the right pace. And in the parent case, it takes even more time because the way to do it is to teach the children. So when he will become a parent, he will know. But that's a generation which is even further away. So it's a tough question.
I think that, yes, sorry. Yeah.
I said, do I get 3 points?
Sure. Well, I think there are some of these grassroots level initiatives by the government and various NGOs, which does look at that aspect. It does look at the comprehensive, that's why I started with the learning environment, right? Which also encompasses the teachers, the parents, the students, various stakeholders across the board who have an influence on the student, so to say. But it is still, there's a lot to be done on that front. So I appreciate that point, and I hope that that can be taken as an insight and we can move with that. Yeah, we have a question at the back, very back of the, yeah. Yeah.
Good morning, panel. Thank you for giving me a chance to question. Actually, I'm from another region of India, came here for studying, and a couple of my friends went to abroad also, Canada, US, and other countries to study. So where I come from, they teach in our BTech, in our bachelor's degree, they teach very different scenarios like web-based technologies and all. And when I came here, I got to know there is a lot more than web-based technologies and regional, on the topic where the regional companies are focusing on. And in my area, most of the colleges teaching what companies is required for, not the globalized thing. And sorry, at that time I didn't know much about the global domains like blockchain, AI, or anything. And also I cannot make understand my parents that what am I doing. They also don't know about that. So anything that we can do for globally, like common areas, kind of course or something that like everyone can understand. Or
Thank you. Do you want to address that? Yes.
I think I have an answer. That's the difference between engineering and computer science. In engineering, you have a problem, you want to solve it. If you want to build a bridge, go to an engineer. If you want to invent a new kind of bridge, go to computer science. And the question, it's a very good question, what do we need to teach? The answer is not what we currently need, but rather what we'll need in the future. Centuries ago, it was the same because the world was stationary and you did what your father and grandfather did. So what you need to learn in order to be in this world is the same as what your grandfather learned. So you could teach you. Here in this world where things are changing in such fast pace, we have to learn how to learn. And we have to learn to innovate or to solve new things. And we have to be prepared to learn things that are not useful because if we don't know what the future will be.
I think also we have to learn to be comfortable with who we are and with not knowing. Because there's always going to be new technologies. There's always going to be something we're missing out on. There's always going to be something we didn't know, or that our parents don't know, or that our teachers didn't know. So I think that part of education and part of the way we relate to technology, again, has to go back to our essential humanity. Can we be comfortable with our own human curiosity and with that sense that there's always more to discover? And then what we don't know about is less of a problem. So we'll learn it as we come, or we'll start innovating and learning for the future, for not what we're missing today, but what hasn't happened yet tomorrow. So I think it does come back to recalibrating what we're trying to do, because otherwise it's going to create a tremendous stress on the system. It's just going to create this tremendous anxiety that we're behind, we don't know, we can't catch up. And that's not going to be ultimately going to be fulfilling individually or collectively as a human race.
Thank you. We had a, could we have a mic here, please? Oh,
there's
okay.
a question.
There's a question at the back, then we'll
Yes.
Hello, I'm Ritvik. I'm an educator as well, a faculty, if you will. And I heavily use a lot of technology in my classes. So the main challenge that we come across as teachers is to balance the concept of how to teach something, how the student learns, as well as how to evaluate as well. Parallelly, we also have an expectation that students at the end of the course, at whatever we teach, make it useful and are able to progress not only from their academic front, but also as far as their career goes. Now, the question that comes up here is, with the advent of a lot of technologies, a lot of scope of new innovations that come through, there is too much for a student to actually learn. From this panel, what I will request is, how do you balance it out? How do you balance it such that the student is able to clearly understand what you're trying to teach, but at the same time, we use the technology and it does not overwhelm the student as well?
I think that's an extension of that, they call it the double innovation, approach, or, where you have to learn the subject matter as well as the technical know-how. And that was with regards to the teacher, but also with the students, as he rightly mentioned. So would you like to take that one? Because it does relate to well-being and, how the students kind of approach the entire process. So, I mean, he was asking about, how one could have a balance of sorts, right? When we are approaching the usage of technology and the students particularly, because it should not become overwhelming, right? I mean, in terms of the technical know-how as well as the usage for the educational purpose that it is being used for. Sometimes there can be a lot of things, thrown at you in terms of instructional material. So how do you balance that out is the question from him.
That, again, it's a very tricky one, because teachers, especially during the pandemic and after the pandemic, were required to become multimedia developers. And if the quality of their PowerPoints and their videos wasn't quite up to what the students were used to, that they're being fed by for-profit companies, entertainment companies, the kids lost interest. So this is definitely a challenge. And I think it goes back to the teacher being able to ask questions to engage. So the teacher, rather than entertaining or feeding information, needs to focus on becoming a better questioner. So inviting students to engage, asking questions that stimulate their imagination, and getting students to do the work. Because, you can have the students in your class creating the technological tools that you need, and they're generally much better and faster at it.
And talking about the evaluation, my best answer is try to see the big picture. We want to evaluate students not so that they can have another number in a spreadsheet of scores, but because we want them, first of all, to know when they succeed or failed, and second, in the future courses, to know that they passed this course knowing the necessary material. So once you understand that, then you can do all kinds of interesting evaluation forms where you actually try to test for understanding rather than for getting the right answers.
Yeah, just a quick comment on that. I mean, I'm pretty much always an optimist with technology. So, and again, it depends on the age, right? So part of the question is how old are your students? But I'm usually on the older students, but I don't see technology as overwhelming. In fact, I see that they're more willing and wanting to have better tools to do their work. So I think that, the balance will come naturally, almost like as students pick their tools, right? If you give them a suite of different resources, they'll use the ones that work best for them. So.
Absolutely. I think one perspective here could be that of the UNESCO toolkit that has been developed and the approach that they have taken, which is again going back to the point of needs-based technology rather than technology-based needs, or whatever the primacy of the technology, because there are various kinds of parameters that are looked at, and therefore probably a meta-dynamical kind of portal or a way of understanding what is the need and how the technology can be harnessed is very, very critical, and that is what the toolkit also talks about. So those could be some perspectives and the perspectives from our panelists as well. Thank you for that point. Yeah, sorry.
Hi, I'm Panachan, CEO of the Chopra Foundation. I think I have more of a problem statement, right? So one of the things, I don't know if you're familiar with the ghost children. There's a phenomenon called the ghost children. This is post-pandemic. Many children didn't go back to school. And I think as a father of an 18-year-old who went through one of these situations, I think we did a very kind of rough cut transition. There was school online, then immediately school went in school. And a huge, I think almost a huge majority of children have not gone back. They're actually afraid to go to school. We are not even addressing that. So one of the things I think we need to look at is what can we do? What is the pedagogy of teaching, training, technology, tools, so these children, my son included, doesn't get left behind? I think today when you look at success, we always look at success and evaluation. I love the Indian word ananda. Joy is the only measure of success. I think now is a time when we have to reevaluate what success really means. And I feel when I've gone through this globally, I'm looking at this, how we have actually transitioned from COVID online to completely now going, I think we missed the mark. And I think we as educators, technologists, policymakers have to make sure that an entire generation which grew up during COVID, which missed their graduation, missed their high school, we have absolutely no idea what are the long-term ramifications. So I think one of the things I would like to look at from this panel and going forward is how can we commit to look at those and come up with policies of things for those ghost children and really commit doing something for them.
Thank you, sir, for that. Yes.
I work in Philadelphia, which is one of the largest cities in America, and in that return to in-person school, the first 10 days were devoted only to social emotional learning and reintegration. The school district has about 200,000 students. And what we found was that there was desperate need. Many kids didn't come back. There's still a very high absentee rate, but the emphasis on restorative practices, community meeting, social emotional learning, what's your inner weather? Our program offers a mindfulness-based critical thinking program to help students depersonalize their issues. So I think really institutionalizing and embedding within the education system that social emotional support, restorative practices are critical. And I think it's not just the pandemic. I do think there's a long tail effect that we're going to continue to see for decades, probably this whole generation. Increased social anxiety, decreased self-confidence, general fear of what's out there, those germs that you can't see, like that story of the ghost was more frightening. And I think that the need for tending to our internal health as educators, as administrators in schools, and for the students is going to take more and more of the forefront, and it's definitely needed.
While we should try to go back and bring the children to school, it's not only graduation. The first class learn how to read. It's a huge problem. But we also need, like the high-tech industry, embrace some of the good stuff and move maybe to hybrid mode, so you don't have to lose class. If you can come, great. If not, let's do it gradually, etc.
I think just to follow on that, I mean, and you mentioned about that not being just a post-COVID phenomena, but also in terms of in India, we have a lot of dropouts as well, and for various reasons. I mean, social reasons, girl children dropout rates have been quite high in various parts of the country. So is there a way in which technology can be used to kind of increase access and equity across the genders, right? And especially in those areas of the country, I think is also an important point, just extending what you just mentioned here. Okay, maybe just one. Okay, we'll just take the last question, please. Yeah. Running short.
Hello, everyone. So my question to the panelists, coming from the area which had more emphasis on this topic. So we've been talking about ChatGPT in this panel right now. So for the people who know ChatGPT, AutoGPT is also very popular right now. So it is nothing but a ChatGPT with brain. It generates a series of tasks and it's trying to complete those tasks given. So there was this interesting Reddit thread on DAN command, which is a special set of prompts for ChatGPT, which unlocks its new powers. Which is personally, I tried it and it has given me results from ChatGPT, which is not supposed to be, which is not meant to do. So AutoGPT coupled with this DAN commands, I don't feel this is right. So this is tending to a place, in a sense, I'm learning from it. So technically, in the area of education, I'm learning from it. I'm learning something, but on the other side, it has an adverse effect or it has a negative effects also. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yes, it's a good question. Two things. One is anything is dual use. If you are learning how to carve wood statues using a power chainsaw, then you should be very careful because it can cut the wood and your fingers as well. So it doesn't mean you don't have to do that, but you have to be careful while doing it. And
Okay, I'll answer that question, I guess, with my kind of final policy recommendation. But ultimately, what this comes down to is learning how to collaborate with machines, right? And there's a lot at stake there. I didn't speak as I wanted to a bit about the need for like ethical upskilling and the rest, but this is fundamentally about how to collaborate, how to teach children that their lives are always going to be involving uses of technology. So the part of that will be answers to your question and others similar, right? Like, how do I effectively interact with this? What are the ethical considerations that I need to bring to the table to make sure that this system is operating the way that it is, that it should, right? So those are the ultimate questions in my mind.
I remember my second point. Since it's the last question, I invite you all, if you want, I'm still here to talk later.
Thank you. I would like to extend our gratitude to all the panelists today. It was a really insightful discussion. I'd like to thank all of you for joining in and contributing to the discussion as well. And we hope to take the insights and the suggestions from this going forward as we go along in the process of the Civil 20 and potentially to the G20 as well. Thank you all for joining and see you soon.
Is it on? Oh, so we're going to have a short tea coffee break, and then we'll be back here in 11:15 for Mr. Vilasdar's keynote, which I forgot the title, so I can't tell you. But take a quick break, stretch your legs, and come right back. Thank you very much.